Local News Women's March Rockford brings the community together ahead of Monday's inauguration to give them a platform to spread a message of empowerment. Dozens of people were at Saturday's 2-hour Resistorhood rally, which is one of several hosted at nationwide. The Rockford one started at Veterans Memorial Hall and included a panel of experts and a Q&A session where people learned how area organizations are preparing to respond to the new administration and how people can get involved.
We want people to understand how leaders in our community are already prepping for the change that's coming, what we're doing to brace ourselves and make sure that nobody's left on the sidelines, and then how we can lean into one another to contribute to that work.